I want to articulate something that a lot of us know just on an instinctual level. That anytime you've got a pastor who steps into the pulpit, they come with a certain lens, a certain framework. And I have known people who come up with who have a teaching framework. And so when they step into the pulpit, they will give you the history and the text and walk you through every nuance of that Bible passage. And it can be fascinating and just phenomenal. And I worked for a guy once who was a chaplain at heart. And so we went and step into the pulpit, and he would want to talk about your deepest hurts and your deepest pain and how Jesus could heal you. And he could be really good at that. The thing that I always resonate, though, is this question of what is the deepest issue that people are wrestling with? What is the thing that keeps people up at night? The question that nags at them when they are trying to rest, when they are trying just to have a moment of peace, and they kind of get that twitch because something keeps nagging at them. What is that? And I have done a deep and exhaustive survey, and I tend to watch a lot of the news and the cultural commentary and read other church professionals and see what they're saying. And there is a consensus out there that people are losing their ever-loving minds. I mean, that just seems to be it. I said that at the 8:30 service, and I just see everybody nod. I'm like, yeah, okay, good to know I hit the mark here this morning. And there's a lot of stuff going on with that. There's always the political issues. There is the foreign policy tragedies. There is earthquakes and assassinations and everything else that happens in this world. And I would submit to you that a big part of what happens in this world is the outrage industry. There are people who monetize your outrage. Think about it. There are people who want very much to get you excited and angry because it leads to more clicks, more views, and more advertising money for them. I was listening to an interview with somebody who's starting a new media company, a new news service, and they said, look, we very much decided to go with the subscription model because we realized the whole ad-generated money is corrosive. Because you always get the temptation to put the most sensational, the most outrageous, the most outrage-inducing piece up there. Because when people click on it, the advertisers don't care if it is a click because they're angry or they're happy. And it just continues to build those clicks. And let me let you in on a dirty little secret. It happens in the church too. I have seen pastors and church leaders and people, parishioners, just living in the outrage. And somebody will get up and say, can you believe what those people are doing? Can you see what that is? And it feeds on the energy, and people want to see everybody else upset about that, and it is this perpetual cycle of anger and outrage leading to anger and outrage leading to anger and outrage. I was talking to my wife about this the other day. I said, yeah, here's where I'm thinking about going with the sermon and talk about this and outline this part. And I said, and we see this in the church too. And I got that far. And she said, yeah, just like, and she named a organization that we're both very familiar with. And I paused for a second. I'm like, you're right. I had been thinking of this other organization over here who are totally opposite theologically and culturally and politically as opposed to the people you just named. But they're doing exactly the same thing. And the funny thing is if I compared those two groups, they would both try and kill me because they're doing exactly the same behaviors on the opposite ends of the spectrum. And I tell you all that as a preface because it points us to something that people are missing. You see, this beautiful chapter 8, which we just heard read for us of Romans, has this great line. And Paul says, for I consider the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. Let me read that again. the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is to be revealed to us. All these people who are shouting about how bad everything is right now, it's the end of the republic, it's the end of Christianity, it's the end of everything. They're missing what Paul is saying right here. This is not the end. And the future glory that God has for us surpasses anything that we're dealing with right now. You see, the whole point of what Paul is writing about is, yes, things are troubled now. Yes, there is sin and pain and sorrow. But God's glory is greater than this. Now, part of the problem we have is we can just see this. We can just see what's happening now. But God has bigger things for us, and that's what Paul keeps reminding us of. And the other part of it is, if we do know this verse, sometimes what we do is we say, well, once we get to heaven, everything will be fine. Once we survive this life and go to heaven, it's all good. And we kind of view our existence on earth as this time when you're trapped, kind of like you're stuck in the back of the airplane in the middle seat, a little too close to the lavatory. And you're just like, I just got to endure this 6-hour flight, and then I'll get somewhere I want to be. We've all been in that seat, haven't we? It's not a good way to live. But sometimes that's how we feel about life on earth. We think, I just got to get through this. But that's not what Paul is saying. He's saying, look, remember, we started in the garden in perfection. Remember, we're going to end in heaven with no more sorrows and no more tears. And in between, God's glory breaks in. Let me give you an example of this. If you were around in the 90s, you probably remember Promise Keepers. For about 15 minutes, it was a really big thing. It was a men's movement, and they did a lot of really cool stuff and a lot of big events. And in the late 90s, they did this thing at the National Mall in Washington, D.C., where they said, we're going to have this giant rally. It was really cool. And so a bunch of guys from my home church said, hey, let's do this. Let's rent a bus. We will drive all night on the bus. We'll go to the rally. As soon as the rally's over, we'll get back on the bus and drive home. And I'm like, it sounds like fun. I'll go. And it was like 12 or 16 hours on the bus each way. And I'm just like, I'm just going to have to endure being on the bus with 40 guys, but the rally will be really cool. And if you ask me about it and ask me about that trip, I would tell you the rally was pretty cool. I don't really remember the rally. I'm sure it was great. But I remember being on the bus. And I remember the 16 hours each way with 40 guys and the fun. And it was just a wonderful experience. It was funny. It was endearing. Read the Bible together, studied the Bible, sang together, joked. 40 guys on a bus, you get a lot of bad jokes. But it was so much fun. And that's what Paul is telling us. That this life here on earth is not not something simply to be endured, but something to love, as God has loved us, and God's grace breaks through in this time. Now, there's another piece I want to pull out of this. In Romans 8:28, just a little bit farther, Paul writes, and we know that those who love God, all things work together for good. Let me read that again. For those who love God, all things work together for good. Now, this verse gets misinterpreted a lot, and the whole thing happens a lot, where people get into this mode where they say, well, if this happens, it must be God's will. If it's good, if it's bad, it's God's will. And that's not what Paul is writing here. He's saying God works good in all things. If I go over here and I slap Brad, and I say, stop being such a Packers fan, and slap him upside the head, you don't get to say that's God's will. That's my sin. It's my sinful nature that makes me slap him. Nothing personal. I'm just using this as an example, okay? That's what you get for sitting in the front row. What God is saying is, or what Paul is saying here is, he's going this whole thing of creation waits for eager longing and says creation was subjected to futility and not willingly. And he goes through all this stuff. He's saying, look, God will bring good things out of these things. But we don't want to confuse that this is actually God's will. And we want to see God working those good things out. One of the classic examples of that is going back to the book of Genesis, where Joseph's brother throw him down a well. And the whole story happens because his brothers are jealous, and his brothers are jealous because dad's made Joseph the favorite child out of all the brothers, and Joseph's being, frankly, a jerk. So is it God's will for any of those things to happen? No. But God works good out of them. Which brings us to the last point I want to underscore. Paul writes this: who shall separate us from the love of God? Shall tribulation or distress or persecution or famine or nakedness or danger or the sword? For I am sure that neither death nor life, nor angels, nor rulers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor heights, nor depths, nor anything else in creation will able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. And I love that. And I love that in part because I always read that at funerals, that nothing can separate you from God. So what I want to say to you is whatever the present distress you are dealing with, whatever the present issues with all these people losing their ever-loving minds, God will never let you go. And that in this time we look forward to God's glory revealed. We see it around us and know that whatever tumult we endure, and frankly, there's enough tumult to go around in this month to go around for a decade. But in the midst of that, God still loves us and will never forsake us. So go forward in that and seeing his glory and his promise to you. Amen.